I'll never forget the way Luna looked at me that morning. Her ears shot up like antennas, her whole body went rigid, and she let out a bark that didn't sound like her at all. It was urgent, desperate even. And in that moment, everything I thought I knew about routine patrol work just shattered. We'd been walking the same industrial road we always did. Nothing special, just warehouses, empty lots, and the occasional truck rumbling by. Luna had always been calm on this route, nose to the ground, tail wagging lazily. But that Tuesday, something changed. She pulled so hard on the leash I almost lost my grip. My heart started pounding because, in 3 years of working with her, Luna had never acted like this. The van was parked at an odd angle behind a chain-link fence, covered in dust and bird droppings like it had been sitting there for weeks. Most people would have walked right past it. I almost did, but Luna wouldn't move. She planted her paws in the gravel and barked again, this deep, guttural sound that made my stomach drop. I remember thinking, trust her. Just trust her. My hands were shaking as I approached the van. Every step felt heavier than the last. Luna stayed right beside me, whining now, her nose pressed against the metal door. I could feel my pulse in my throat. Part of me wanted to call it in, wait for backup, follow protocol. But something in Luna's eyes told me there wasn't time for that. I reached for the handle, cold and rusty under my palm. The door creaked open, and the smell hit me first. Stale air. Fear. Something alive. And then I saw them. Eyes staring back at me from the darkness. Small. Terrified. Human. My breath caught. My mind couldn't process it fast enough. This wasn't supposed to happen on a Tuesday morning. Not here, not to me. But Luna had known. Somehow, she had known. If you're listening to this story, I hope you'll stay with me through what happened next. There's so much more I need to tell you. Hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how this moment changed everything, not just for me, but for the lives we found in that van. Because some discoveries you can't unsee. Some moments you carry forever. The darkness inside that van was thick, suffocating. My eyes hadn't adjusted yet, but I could hear breathing. Soft, rapid, terrified breathing that made every hair on my body stand up. I fumbled for my flashlight with trembling fingers, and when the beam finally cut through the blackness, I had to bite down hard to keep from crying out. 3 children, huddled together in the back corner like frightened animals. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10. She had her arms wrapped around 2 smaller ones, a boy and a girl, their faces streaked with dirt and tears. They flinched when the light hit them, shrinking back even further, and I realized with a sickening jolt that they thought I was there to hurt them. "It's okay," I whispered, but my voice cracked. "It's okay. I'm here to help." The words felt so inadequate, so impossibly small for what I was seeing. The van floor was littered with empty water bottles and food wrappers. A torn blanket lay bunched in the corner. The heat inside was unbearable, even with the door open now. I couldn't imagine how long they'd been in there, or how they'd survived. The oldest girl's lips were cracked and bleeding. The little boy wasn't wearing shoes, and the smallest one, she couldn't have been more than 4, just stared at me with these huge, hollow eyes that I still see when I close mine at night. Luna pushed past me gently, her training forgotten, and went straight to the children. She licked the little girl's hand, and for the first time, I saw something break in that child's face. Not fear. Relief. Like she finally understood that maybe, just maybe, the nightmare was ending. My radio felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds as I called it in. My supervisor's voice came through asking for details, but I couldn't speak. I physically could not form the words to describe what I was looking at. How do you explain that you found 3 children locked in an abandoned van like cargo? Like they were nothing? The oldest girl finally spoke. Her voice was so quiet, I had to lean in to hear her. "Are we going home?" she asked, and my heart shattered into a million pieces because I didn't know where home was for them. I didn't know if they even had one to go back to. I didn't know anything except that someone had put them here and left them to die. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around the smallest one. She was shivering despite the heat, her little body going into shock. The boy reached out and grabbed my hand with a grip so tight it hurt, and I let him hold on. I let them all hold on to whatever piece of me they needed, because it was the only thing I could offer in that moment. Sirens wailed in the distance, getting closer. Help was coming. But sitting there in that van with those 3 broken children and my faithful dog who had saved them, I knew that nothing would ever be the same. Not for them, not for me. Some things change you at a cellular level, and this was one of them. I'd worked with Luna for 3 years before that day, but I'd never truly understood the depth of what she was capable of. Not really. Sure, I'd seen her find narcotics in hidden compartments, detect explosives in training scenarios, track suspects through dense woods. But this was something else entirely. This was instinct meeting purpose in a way that felt almost sacred. Canine handlers will tell you that the bond with their dog is different from anything else. It's not like having a pet. It's not even like having a partner in the traditional sense. It's deeper, more primal. You learn to read each other's energy, anticipate each other's movements, communicate without words. But even with all that training, all those hours working together, I'd underestimated her. Police dogs are trained to detect specific scents. Drugs have a chemical signature. Explosives have compounds that trigger their alert response. But Luna wasn't trained to find missing children. That wasn't part of her official skill set. Yet somehow, she knew. She knew those kids were in that van, and she knew they needed help. I've thought about it every day since. What did she smell? Fear has a scent. I know that now. Stress hormones, adrenaline, the biochemical markers of terror seeping through human pores. Maybe she detected the staleness of the air, the wrongness of human presence in a place that should have been empty. Or maybe it was something even more inexplicable, something that science hasn't quite figured out how to measure yet. Dogs have nearly 300 million scent receptors compared to our measly 6 million. They can smell things we can't even imagine. They can detect diseases, predict seizures, sense emotional distress. Luna's nose was processing information that my human brain couldn't even begin to comprehend. While I saw an abandoned van, she smelled a story. A terrible, urgent story that demanded immediate action. But here's what haunts me in the best possible way. Luna didn't just detect something unusual. She insisted. She refused to move on. She made me listen. And that's the part that goes beyond training. That's the part where instinct becomes something almost mystical. I remember her academy instructor telling me once that the best canines have what he called independent thinking. They can follow commands perfectly, but they also know when to break protocol, when to trust their own judgment over yours. Most handlers struggle with that. We want control. We want predictability. But the truly exceptional dogs, the ones who save lives, they're the ones who know when to say, "No, human, you're wrong. Listen to me." Luna was one of those dogs, and that morning she was telling me something I didn't want to hear, something I couldn't quite believe. But she wouldn't let it go. She barked with an urgency I'd never heard before. Her whole body vibrated with purpose, Every fiber of her being was screaming that something was catastrophically wrong. I've trained dozens of handlers since then, and I always tell them the same thing. Your dog knows things you don't. Their world is built on information you can't access. And the day you stop trusting their instincts is the day you've failed both of them and yourself. Luna passed away 2 years ago. Cancer took her faster than any of us expected. But in those final days, when I sat beside her and held her gray muzzle in my hands, I thanked her. I thanked her for being smarter than me, for being braver than me, for refusing to walk past that van even when I wanted to. Because those 3 children are alive today, because a dog trusted her nose more than I trusted my eyes. And if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. The first patrol car arrived within 6 minutes, but it felt like hours. I stayed in that van with those children. Luna pressed against my side, all of us waiting in this strange, suspended moment between horror and hope. I kept talking to them softly, telling them help was coming, telling them they were safe now, even though I wasn't sure they believed me. I wasn't sure I believed me. Detective Sarah Morrison was the first through the fence. I'd worked with her before on a few cases, and I've never been so grateful to see someone in my entire life. She took one look inside that van, and her face went pale. Professional composure cracked for just a second before she pulled it back together. "Jesus," she whispered. Just that, nothing else. Because what else was there to say? Within 20 minutes, the scene transformed into controlled chaos. Ambulances, more patrol cars, child services. The fire department brought water and medical supplies. Someone draped space blankets around the children even though it was warm outside, because their bodies had gone into shock. A paramedic tried to separate the oldest girl from her siblings to examine her, and she screamed. Actually screamed. So they examined all 3 together, huddled on that blanket, refusing to let go of each other. I had to give my statement 3 times. What time did I find them? What made me check the van? Had I touched anything inside? Moved anything? The questions felt invasive, clinical, when all I wanted to do was hold those kids and tell them the world wasn't always this cruel. But I answered everything. I described every detail I could remember, even though my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Detective Morrison pulled me aside while forensics photographed the van. "We need to know who they are," she said quietly. "None of them are talking. The oldest one told us their names, but she won't say anything else. No last names, no addresses, nothing about who put them there." Her frustration was palpable, but underneath it, I could see the same helpless rage I was feeling. They ran the children's descriptions through missing persons databases. 3 kids, matching their ages and appearances, reported missing from a town 200 miles away. Different last names, different addresses, all within the past 9 days. The pieces started coming together in a way that made my stomach turn. This wasn't random. This wasn't a parent having a breakdown. This was calculated, planned, evil. The FBI arrived by noon, special agents in dark suits who transformed our local investigation into something federal. Human trafficking, they said. The words hung in the air like poison. They'd been tracking a network for months, and our discovery might be the break they needed. Might be. That word felt like a knife. These children were still just evidence to them, pieces in a larger puzzle. I watched them load the kids into an ambulance, still wrapped in those space blankets, still holding on to each other like their lives depended on it. The smallest one looked back at me, and I waved. She didn't wave back. She just stared with those enormous eyes, and I wondered what she was thinking. If she understood that she was saved. if she'd ever feel safe again. Luna and I were sent home around 3 in the afternoon, but I couldn't leave. I sat in my patrol car outside the police station, watching investigators come and go, waiting for updates I had no right to demand. My lieutenant finally came out and tapped on my window. "Go home, Officer Hayes," he said, not unkindly. "You did your job. Now let us do ours." But it didn't feel done. It felt like it was just beginning. Because finding those children was one thing, finding who put them there was another. And making sure they'd be okay, that they'd recover from whatever hell they'd endured, that felt impossible. The investigation spread like wildfire after that. Search warrants, arrests, a whole network of people who bought and sold children like they were commodities. It took 6 months to dismantle completely, and every new detail that emerged made me feel sicker, made me realize how close we'd come to never finding them at all. Sometimes I think about the timing. If Luna and I had walked that route an hour later, if I'd ignored her barking, if that van had been parked somewhere else, somewhere we didn't patrol, the what-ifs keep me awake at night, even now. Because for every child we save, how many do we miss? I thought I understood what it meant to be a police officer before that day. I'd taken the oath, worn the uniform, done my duty. I'd seen car accidents and domestic disputes, arrested people, written reports. I'd believed I was making a difference. But standing in that van with those 3 terrified children staring up at me, I realized I'd never really understood the weight of this job. Not until that moment. The nightmares started about a week later. I'd close my eyes and see their faces. The oldest girl's cracked lips. The little boy's bare feet on that filthy van floor. The smallest one's hollow stare. I'd wake up in a cold sweat, gasping, convinced I'd imagined the whole thing. Convinced I'd left them there, that I'd walked away. My therapist later told me it was a normal response to trauma, but it didn't feel normal. It felt like I was drowning. My wife noticed the change immediately. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep properly. I'd sit at the dinner table and just stare at my food, thinking about those empty water bottles in the van, thinking about how thirsty they must have been, how scared. Emma tried to be patient, tried to understand, but how could she? How could anyone who wasn't there possibly understand what it felt like to open that door? I requested a leave of absence 2 months after the rescue. My lieutenant tried to talk me out of it, said I needed to stay busy, stay focused. But I couldn't function anymore. Every call felt meaningless compared to what had happened. Traffic stops, noise complaints, petty theft. It all felt like I was wasting time when there might be another van somewhere with more children inside. The obsession consumed me. I spent my leave researching. I couldn't help myself. I learned everything I could about human trafficking, about the signs we miss, the systems that fail. I attended seminars and workshops, some official, some not. I met other officers who'd found victims, and we shared this unspoken understanding, this wound that never quite healed. We'd all been changed by what we'd seen, marked by it in ways that separated us from everyone else. But something else happened during those months away, something unexpected. I received a letter. It came through the police department, forwarded to my home address. The handwriting was careful, childish. Inside was a drawing. 3 stick figures holding hands under a bright yellow sun. A dog with a big smile. And at the bottom, in wobbly letters, "Thank you for finding us." I sat on my kitchen floor and cried. Really cried. For the first time since that morning. Emma found me there, clutching that piece of paper like it was the most precious thing in the world. Because it was. It meant they were okay. Not healed, maybe not even close to okay, but alive, drawing pictures, remembering that they'd been found. That letter changed something in me. The nightmares didn't stop completely, but they shifted. Instead of seeing their terrified faces, I started seeing them holding hands under that yellow sun. Instead of hearing their silence, I imagined them laughing. Maybe it wasn't real. Maybe they were still struggling. But that letter gave me permission to hope. And hope was something I desperately needed. I went back to work 3 months later, but I was different. Everyone could see it. I volunteered for every training session on human trafficking. I pushed our department to implement new protocols for checking abandoned vehicles. I became that person, the one who wouldn't let things go, who saw danger in every shadow. Some of my colleagues thought I'd lost perspective. Maybe I had, but I'd also gained something. I started speaking at schools, teaching kids about safety, about trusting their instincts. I'd bring Luna with me, and I'd watch children's faces light up when they petted her. I'd tell them in age-appropriate ways that sometimes dogs can be heroes, that sometimes paying attention to the small things can save lives. I never told them the full story, but I carried it with me into every classroom. My marriage struggled. I won't pretend it didn't. Emma deserved a husband who came home and left work at the door, and I couldn't be that person anymore. We went to counseling. We fought. We nearly gave up. But eventually, slowly, we found a new normal. She learned to understand that I'd been fundamentally changed, and I learned that I couldn't let that change destroy everything good in my life. I get letters sometimes, even now, from the children's foster families. Updates on how they're doing. The oldest girl is in high school now, getting good grades, thinking about college. The boy joined a soccer team. The little one, she's learning piano. They're scattered across different homes, different cities, but they're alive. They're growing. They're more than that terrible day in the van. People ask me if I'd do it differently, knowing what I know now about how it would affect me. They ask if the cost was worth it. And I look at those letters, at that drawing still hanging on my refrigerator, and I know the answer. I'd open that van door 1,000 times. I'd carry these nightmares forever if it meant those 3 kids got to grow up, got to draw pictures under yellow suns. Luna saved their lives that day, but in a strange way, they saved mine too. They taught me what actually matters. They showed me that this job, at its core, isn't about tickets or arrests or statistics. It's about the moments when you stand between someone and the worst thing that could happen to them. And if you're lucky, if you're paying attention, you get to be the person who changes everything. That's what I carry now. Not just the trauma, but the purpose. The knowledge that one moment, one decision, one dog's instinct can ripple outward and change the entire trajectory of a life. 3 lives, actually. Or 4, if you count mine. I've been asked countless times since that day what made me actually open the van door. Why didn't I just call it in and wait for backup? Why did I trust Luna's judgment over my own training, over protocol, over common sense? And the honest answer is, I almost didn't. I almost walked away. There's this voice that lives in every police officer's head. The practical one. The one that says, follow procedure, cover yourself, don't take unnecessary risks. That voice was screaming at me that morning. The van looked abandoned. Luna was probably just smelling a dead animal, or old food, or any number of mundane things that dogs get excited about. Walking away would have been the reasonable choice, the safe choice. But here's what I've learned, and what I wish I'd understood years earlier. Dogs don't lie. They don't have ulterior motives. They don't second-guess themselves or worry about looking foolish. When your dog tells you something is wrong, Something is wrong. Period. It might not be what you expect. It might not make sense to your human brain, but it's real. Luna had never acted that way before. In 3 years of daily patrols, she'd never planted her feet and refused to move. She'd never barked with that particular urgency, that desperate insistence that made my blood run cold. Every cell in her body was screaming that I needed to pay attention, and I almost ignored her because my human logic couldn't make sense of it. I think about the other times I'd dismissed her signals. Small things, mostly. A hesitation at a doorway that I'd attributed to her being tired. A whine during a traffic stop that I'd thought meant she needed water. Were there other moments when she was trying to tell me something important and I just wasn't listening? That question haunts me more than I'd like to admit. My friend Rick, he's a handler too, lost his partner Max to a gunshot 2 years before Luna found those kids. He told me something once that I didn't fully understand until that morning. He said, "Your dog will die for you without hesitation. The least you can do is trust them when they're trying to keep you alive." At the time, I thought he was being dramatic, still grieving. But he was right. These dogs put everything on the line for us, and we owe them our attention, our trust, our willingness to look foolish if it means taking them seriously. I've started training new handlers differently now. I make them spend an entire week just watching their dogs. Not commanding, not drilling, just observing. Learning to read the subtle shifts in body language, the different tones of bark, the way their energy changes when something isn't right. Because the technical training is important, sure, but the relationship is everything. You have to know your dog so well that you can distinguish between "I see a squirrel" excitement and "something is genuinely wrong" alarm. There was a handler in my department, young guy named Torres, who called me about 6 months after the van incident. His dog had been acting strange around a storage unit during a routine sweep. Nothing triggered their sensors, no probable cause for a warrant. But the dog wouldn't stop pawing at the door. Torres wanted to know what to do. Should he follow protocol, or should he trust his gut? I told him what I wish someone had told me earlier in my career. Your dog is seeing something you can't. Listen to them. He got that warrant. They found a woman who'd been held captive for 3 days, dehydrated and barely conscious. Torres called me afterward, voice shaking, and said, "I almost walked away. I almost ignored him." We almost ignore them all the time. We let our human skepticism override their animal knowing. We convince ourselves that we're smarter, more rational, better equipped to make decisions. But in situations like these, we're not. We're blind to an entire world of information that they process effortlessly. Luna knew those children were in that van before I opened the door. She knew they were in distress, probably knew how many there were, might have even sensed how long they'd been there. All that information was available to her while I stood there debating whether it was worth investigating. While I wasted precious seconds questioning her judgment. I keep her old collar in my locker at work. Sometimes, before a shift, I hold it and remind myself of that morning. Remind myself that she was right when I was wrong. That her instincts were sharper than my training. That the bond between handler and canine isn't just about commands and obedience. It's about mutual respect and trust flowing both ways. People love dogs because they're loyal, because they're affectionate, because they make us feel less alone. But working dogs are something more. They're partners with abilities we can barely comprehend. And when we're lucky enough to work alongside them, we have a responsibility to honor what they bring to that partnership. Not just their noses, or their speed, or their courage, but their judgment. If Luna could have spoken that morning, she would have said, "Stop thinking and start acting." stop doubting, and start trusting. There are children dying in that van, and we're the only ones who can help them. But she couldn't speak. All she could do was bark and pull and refuse to move until I finally listened. So now I tell every handler, every dog owner, every person who shares their life with a canine companion, when your dog insists something is wrong, believe them. Don't dismiss it. Don't rationalize it away. Don't let your human arrogance convince you that you know better. Because sometimes, maybe more often than we'd like to admit, they're the smart ones, and we're just trying to catch up. Those 3 children are alive today because I trusted my dog. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure other handlers understand that their dogs are not just tools or assets or even pets. They're partners, teachers. Sometimes, they're the only thing standing between someone and death. Trust your dog. Always. Even when it doesn't make sense. Especially when it doesn't make sense. Because the day you stop listening is the day you miss something that matters. And some things, once missed, can never be recovered. The media storm hit about 48 hours after we found the children. Local news first, then regional, then somehow it went national. K-9 officer discovers trafficking victims appeared on screens across the country. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Interview requests, speaking invitations, people calling me a hero, which made me physically uncomfortable because I didn't feel like one. I felt like someone who'd almost walked past 3 dying children. The department held a press conference. I had to stand there in my dress uniform, Luna beside me, while the chief talked about exemplary police work and community safety. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. Luna got more attention than I did, which felt appropriate. She was the real hero. I was just the human who'd finally listened. But the real story, the one that mattered, was happening away from the cameras. Those 3 children were placed in emergency foster care while the system tried to figure out what came next. Their families had been contacted, but the situation was complicated. The investigation revealed that 2 of them had been taken from neglectful homes, places where their disappearances hadn't even been reported for days. The system had failed them long before they ended up in that van. I wasn't supposed to have contact with them. Professional boundaries, legal considerations, ongoing investigation. There were a dozen reasons why I needed to stay away. But Detective Morrison would update me sometimes. Unofficial conversations over coffee, where she'd tell me little things. The oldest girl, Maya, was having nightmares but was starting to talk to her therapist. The boy, Carlos, had gained 7 pounds and was sleeping through the night. The little one, Sophia, still didn't talk much, but she'd asked her foster mom if she could get a dog someday. 6 months after the rescue, I received an invitation. The foster families wanted to arrange a meeting, if I was willing. They thought it might help the children to see me again, to understand that the scary morning in the van had led to safety. My therapist had concerns. So did my lieutenant. But I couldn't say no. I needed to see them, too. Needed to know they were really okay. We met at a park on a Sunday afternoon. Neutral ground, supervised, carefully planned. I brought Luna, who was older now, slower, but still eager to work. I saw them before they saw me. 3 children playing on swings, laughing, looking so heartbreakingly normal that I had to stop walking for a moment to collect myself. Maya recognized me first. She went still, and I watched her face cycle through emotions. Recognition, fear, then something that looked like relief. She said something to her foster mother, who nodded, and then Maya walked toward me. Slowly at first, then faster. She stopped about 10 feet away. This brave little girl who'd held her siblings together in the darkest moment of their lives. and she just looked at me. "You came back," she said finally, like she'd been afraid I wouldn't, like she'd thought maybe she'd imagined me. "I came back," I confirmed, my voice thick. "I wanted to make sure you were okay." Luna broke the tension by trotting over to her, tail wagging. Maya knelt down and buried her face in Luna's fur, and I saw her shoulders shake. She was crying, but when she looked up, she was smiling. "I remember her," she whispered. "She was so nice to us." Carlos and Sophia came over then, less hesitant, more curious. Carlos peppered me with questions about police work and what Luna could do. Sophia just held onto my hand and didn't let go for the entire hour we spent there. Their foster families stood back, giving us space but staying close enough to intervene if needed. They didn't need to. It was peaceful. Healing, even. Before we left, Maya pulled something from her pocket. A photograph, wrinkled from being carried around. It was from that day. Someone had taken a picture of Luna and me standing by the ambulance. Maya had drawn a heart around it in red crayon. "Can I keep this?" she asked, like she needed permission to hold on to that memory. "Of course," I told her. "And maybe someday, when you're ready, you can tell me what you want to be when you grow up." She thought about it seriously. "Maybe a police officer," she said, "like you, so I can help other kids." I had to turn away for a moment because I couldn't let her see me cry. This child, who'd been through hell, who had every reason to hate the world, wanted to help people, wanted to be like me, when I still felt like I'd barely done enough. The years that followed brought more updates, more small milestones. Carlos got adopted by his foster family and sent me an invitation to the celebration. Maya graduated middle school with honors and included a note thanking me for giving her a future to work toward. Sophia learned to ride a bike, started speaking more, slowly came out of her shell. They were healing. Not perfectly, not completely, but genuinely. Luna passed away on a Tuesday morning, peaceful and surrounded by love. I held her as she went, whispering thank yous into her soft fur. "Thank you for being braver than me. Thank you for knowing what I couldn't see. Thank you for those 3 lives." The department gave her a full honors funeral, but the moment that broke me was the flowers that arrived from Maya, Carlos, and Sophia. 3 bouquets, 3 cards, 3 children who understood that Luna had saved them. I retired from active duty 2 years ago, but I didn't stop working. I consult now, teaching other departments about human trafficking indicators, about trusting K-9 instincts, about the small decisions that can mean everything. I carry that photograph Maya gave me, the one with the red crayon heart, in my wallet. On hard days, I take it out and remember why this work matters. Maya is in college now, studying criminal justice. She emails me sometimes, asking for advice, or just checking in. Carlos is in high school, playing football, living the teenage life he almost didn't get to have. Sophia is learning to play piano and sent me a video of her first recital. They're not just surviving, they're thriving. They're becoming the people they were always meant to be. The anniversary comes around every year. August 15th. The day Luna barked at an abandoned van and everything changed. I visit her grave that morning, every year without fail, and I tell her about the kids, about how Maya made the dean's list, about Carlos scoring the winning touchdown, about Sophia's piano recital. I tell her she did good, better than good. She changed the world, one insistent bark at a time. People still ask me about that day, what it felt like, what I was thinking, if I knew how big it would become, and I always tell them the same thing. I didn't feel heroic. I felt terrified. I felt inadequate. I felt like I was drowning in a situation I wasn't prepared for. But I showed up. I listened to my dog. I opened that door. And sometimes, that's all it takes. Sometimes showing up is enough. Those 3 children got to grow up because of a series of small choices. Because I walked that route that morning. Because Luna insisted we stop. Because I decided to trust her over my own doubts. Because first responders showed up quickly. Because foster families opened their homes. Because therapists and social workers and teachers and strangers chose to care. It wasn't just me. It was never just me. But it started with a dog who wouldn't stop barking. And a handler who finally listened. That's the real lesson I carry forward. Not that I'm special, or particularly brave, or anything exceptional. Just that I was there, and I paid attention, and I acted. And that's available to everyone. Every single person has moments where they can choose to stop, to listen, to care enough to investigate when something feels wrong. We all have the capacity to change someone's life. We just have to be willing to trust our instincts, or, in my case, trust Luna's. The story could have ended so differently. If I'd been 5 minutes later. If I'd ignored Luna. If the children had been in that van another day in the August heat. The what-ifs are endless and terrifying. But they also remind me that every moment matters. Every decision has weight. Every time we choose to pay attention instead of walking past, we're participating in something bigger than ourselves. Maya, Carlos, and Sophia are alive. They're healing. They're building futures that were almost stolen from them. And whenever I doubt whether this work means anything, whenever I wonder if one person can actually make a difference, I think about 3 children holding hands under a yellow sun that they drew with crayons. I think about the life they get to live now, and I know the answer. 1 dog, 1 van, 1 moment of trust. That's all it took to change everything.